How are you? And thanks for clicking into another video from the Open Author. This one is 7 writing tips that do not work. Now, this is interesting. I've compiled this video along with another video. They're actually married to each other. This one is 7 writing tips that do not work. The other one is 7 writing tips that do work. What I'm trying to do essentially with these videos is separate the bullshit from the sort of golden nugget advice when it comes to creative writing. Because there's so much information out there, and you can take it from me. I'm somebody who has taught at workshops, I've taught at school level, at college level, at university level, and I know how much bullshit there is out there when it comes to people giving tips about creative writing. So this one is going to take away or extract the bullshit advice. This is 7 writing tips you may have heard that I do not want you to follow. Why don't we just get straight down to it? Okay, so I did mention that this video is married to another one. This is 7 writing tips that you should not follow. There is another video, 7 writing tips that you should follow. I'm going to put a link to that video in the description below. So if you want to have a look at the description, you'll see the link in there. You may want to watch that video after this. So this one is 7 writing tips that are out there on the internet. They're everywhere. You may have heard them before, but they are tips I do not want you to follow. It's not good advice. So why don't we get down to number 1, or the number 1 piece of advice that seems to be out there constantly that is utter bullshit, is that you need to get a degree in creative writing if you want to be taken seriously as a writer. No, that's not what you need to do at all. Absolutely not. It's bullshit. So, I mean, you name an author and I probably almost guarantee that they don't have a degree or a qualification in creative writing. It's a bit of a natural skill set that he or she felt that they had, and when they sat down to write a book, they didn't need some lecturer in a university telling them exactly what they needed to do. But now, I'm not dismissing all realms of education when it comes to creative writing, because I'd be doing myself out of a job in that regard, because I've taught it in so many different entities and so many different schools and colleges. So I'm not dismissing it all. I'm just suggesting that you don't have to go down that educational route if you want to write a book. For very simple reasons. There isn't one publisher or one agent that exists out there that is going to look for your education credentials when you send in your manuscript for them to consider for representation or for publication. No publisher is going to do that. Nobody cares if you have a degree or you have a diploma in creative writing. Nobody cares if your degree is in accountancy and you happen to be writing a book about crime. It really doesn't compute. It doesn't marry. Publishers and agents don't care about your educational background. They only care if your manuscript is good enough for them to sell. So this idea that you will only be taken seriously as a creative writer or as an author if you have relevant qualifications, bullshit. It's not how this industry works. Now, there are plenty more tips out there that are bullshit that you don't necessarily have to follow, or I don't want you to listen to. And number 2 is that you should only write what you know. This one does the rounds a lot. It's out there often, and I've heard lecturers and other authors and even publishers sort of sprout this one out there. It's not good advice, and it's not good advice for one simple reason, is that it actually stems the creativity within people. So if they believe that they should only write what they know, well then suddenly there's doors closing on the possibilities within their mind of where their stories can go or what sort of stories they can concoct. So I mean, I'll dismiss this in the next 5 seconds actually, that you shouldn't necessarily just write what you know. So did J.K. Rowling in 1996 know all about magic schools before she conceived the idea for Harry Potter? Of course not. Or does J.R.R. Tolkien know all about Middle Earth before he wrote Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit? It's just, it's not conducive. It's not good advice. So if you are only going to write what you know, you are limiting yourself. And it seems to be a piece of advice that's passed on routinely. I don't want you to listen to it anymore. Write what you know. Bullshit. Now, another bullshit piece of advice that seems to get passed around regularly is that you should never use said as a dialogue tag. Nope. It's not good advice. In fact, I actually teach or preach the opposite of that. I think that said should be used as a dialogue tag more than anything else. So, in some textbooks it says said is too boring a word, that you shouldn't use it as a dialogue tag. But actually, they're right in some way. Said is a boring dialogue tag, but that's exactly why you should use it. Because if you, as a writer, are trying to, give off an impression to your reader by using a dialogue tag, then you're sort of missing the point of great creative writing. So if you are using verbs like mumbled or spat out or, whimpered or exclaimed, which I see way too often in amateur manuscripts, you're giving a crutch tell to your reader. Whereas if you use said, it's almost like, because it's such a boring word, it's almost like skimmed over by the reader, and that's a good thing, because a dialogue tag should not necessarily be used as a crutch for you to get your point across as a writer. So if your character is angry and they exclaimed something, you shouldn't necessarily explain their anger through the dialogue tag. You should be good enough at your craft to get across that character is angry without using the dialogue tag. So perhaps paint your character as angry before they say something, and then after the dialogue just use said. Because this idea that you should use these other verbs that I've mentioned, such as mumbled or exclaimed or whimpered, it's actually a sign to me that the writer is not fully confident of their ability, and they feel as if they have to get their point across in the dialogue tag. Don't do that. You have to be better than that. You have to get your point across, or paint your character's feelings in a more descriptive way rather than in the dialogue tag. Now, I don't want to get too technical here, because it's a very, very simple rule, but this idea that somebody says you shouldn't use said as a dialogue tag is definitely bullshit. I suggest that you use said more often than anything else. So when you see this written down, or when somebody passes on this piece of advice that you shouldn't use said as a dialogue tag, just toss that piece of advice in the fuck it bucket. It's no good. Now, another piece of advice that is constantly passed on that is equally as bad is that you should constantly use a range of sentence types. Now, the reason I think this is bad advice is because it again stems to creativity. So if you were a writer and you're sitting at home and you're tapping away on your laptop and you're suddenly thinking, oh, I've used 2 short sentences in a row, I need to use a compound sentence next. That's not good, because what it's doing is it's bogging you, it's stopping you from being creative. It's actually making the process of writing a book almost become like a puzzle. So if you're conscious of your sentence types as you're writing your novel, you're not going to produce a good novel. Because, in fact, you're not even going to enjoy the process of writing the novel. But the reason it won't be any good is because you're too conscious. So when you're writing a novel and you want to be as creative as you possibly can, I don't want you to be constantly thinking of different reams of sentence types that you should be using. So you will, from reading a lot, understand the flow of a novel. So I want you to be more conscious of your flow of your novel, or the flow of your manuscript as you're going through it, rather than thinking of all these technicalities like, maybe I should use a complex sentence next because I've just used a compound and I don't want to use 2 compounds back to back. I don't want you overly conscious of that. If you are an experienced reader, i.e. as in if you read a lot, that is enough for me, because you will understand flow and you'll understand pace. And the more you read, the more you will understand that. But I don't want you overly conscious of the technicalities of the English language or of the English syntax. I teach creative writing routinely, but I try to rid my students of all these technicalities, such as understanding what metaphors and similes are and what all these different language devices are. And even when it comes down to syntax or sentence types, I don't want you conscious of that, because it stems to creativity. It's not good. It bogs you down as you're writing. It gets in the way. I want you to relax and be as creative as you possibly can. If you're constantly thinking of these technicalities such as sentence types, you're not going to relax, you're not going to create, and you're not going to write a good novel. So forget that tip. Another one I want you to forget is this: description is great writing. It's not. Description is part of great writing, absolutely. You have to be able to describe in such a good way that it paints a picture in the mind of your reader. But this idea that description is the be-all and end-all of creative writing, like some people teach and as some people pass on as good advice, it's not good. Too many amateur writers over-describe, and over-description in a manuscript, to me, screams amateur or novice writer. So you don't have to describe every room your character walks into. You don't have to describe every environment your character happens to be in. In fact, you don't have to over describe exactly how or what your character's appearance is. That's not good writing. And so many people fall into this trap of thinking that description is great writing because they've heard it and that's what they learned at secondary school, that, you know, if you describe, I'll be a good writer. Listen, there's a lot more to it than description. Description is part of it, dialogue is another part of it, characterization is another part of it. There's so many different elements that you will get right and you can get right, especially if you read. You have to read a lot, remember, that's always my main tip. But if you stay tuned to this channel, we'll be talking about all the elements that need to go into writing a novel. But this idea that just description will get you through it alone, also toss that in the fuck it bucket. It's not good advice. Another piece of advice that I constantly see passed down that really pains me is this: that you need to read everything, even stuff that is not in your genre. No, it's not going to help you. Listen, I do suggest to all my students that they should read as much as they can, but my suggestion in that regard is that they read as much as they can in the genre that they want to write in. So if you want to be a romance novelist, read all the best romance novels there are out there. Want to be a crime thriller writer, read all the great crime thrillers. You know, you want to be a fantasy novelist, read all the fantasy you can. So, but this idea that if you want to be a crime thriller that you should also read romance and also read fantasy literature and also read historical and also read non-fiction, it's not going to help you. You know, your goal at the end of the day is, if it is to write a great crime thriller, is to write a great crime thriller. So I don't understand how reading the next Cecilia Ahern romance thriller is going to help you. It's not. But read all the great crime thrillers, of course, and the crime thriller writers. But this snobby idea that's passed down from different lecturers and different people at workshops that, no, you need to read everything. You need to read all genres if you want to be considered a good writer. Pfft, bullshit. Don't listen to it. Read as often as you can, but read in the genre that you want to write in. It will hugely help you. Now, another piece of advice that gets passed down on a consistent basis is this: that you should write every day. You know, chance to be a fucking thing. But, and it would help you, yeah, if you write every day. But I do not want you to think that if you're not writing every day, that you will not finish the novel that you're desperate to finish. Because I've had so many students come to me over the years saying, oh, David, you know what, I haven't worked on this in 2 weeks and I'm not quite sure I'm going to get back into it. People say I should be writing every day and I can't afford the time. And my advice in that regard is, okay, relax. Have a read back over what you've written, get back into the pacing and into the flow that you had, and then continue writing that novel. Because, listen, I'm testament that you don't have to write every day to write a novel, because the book that landed me a 3-book publishing deal midday, that took me 2 years to write, and I wasn't writing every day. Far from it. I could write when I got to it. Now, I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I can write every day now, and I do feel as if I'm improving as an author because of that. But I don't expect you, who you probably have a full-time job, or you probably have children, or you have a lot of other things going on, different hobbies other than writing. So I don't expect you to write every day, and nor do I think that you won't finish that manuscript if you don't write every day. But what I do preach, and I do want you to adhere to, is I want you to find time to write. So if that's only on a Wednesday afternoon and a Saturday morning that you can find an hour on each day to write, but just make sure that you stay consistent in that you always know that Wednesday between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. you are at your laptop and you're tapping away on the keyboard and your Wi-Fi is fucking turned off. And then on the Sunday morning between 10 and 11 a.m. or whatever it is that you can afford another hour. So you stick to that routine, because routine will help you write a book. But this idea that you will not write a novel unless you write every day, bullshit. Okay, so they are 7 pieces of advice that are constantly passed down that I want you to rip up and throw away. It's not going to help you. So I'm just trying to, as I mentioned with these videos, separate the bullshit advice from the good advice. Now, the good advice is in a video called 7 Writing Tips That Do Work that I want you to click into. And if you haven't already seen it, it's in the description below. Aside from that, I hope this video helped in some way. I'm just trying to get you into the mindset that there are some bullshit tips out there, and there's some that I don't want you to listen to or adhere to. So this has been another video from The Open Author. Do visit my website, theopenauthor.com. You can also check out Future Author Society, which is a Facebook group where I upload all these videos and give help and hints and tips along the way when I can get to that group. Other than that, if you can subscribe to these videos, they will pop up in your feed every so often. I'll be doing one a week over the next few months. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you took something from this. If you did, let your friends know, especially those who would like to write a book, who have the same ambition as you. Until then, I'll see you around.